we got to get on this issue right now because this is important, it's timely,
Oh yeah.
and usually when you have issues like this, as you know, with your own audiences there, is that people are pay attention.
Well, yeah, and you know, I like what I do. It's all good, but I really like tackling these subjects because
Yeah.
when you do this, as long as you and I have been doing communications and broadcasting, that's just the same old thing.
Yeah.
And this is what the significance is like not the score, not wins the first game, but what are these guys? Because you know, in our lifetime, we've never seen an en masse of athletes step up like this.
No, I never have ever. You know, a lot of people think about sports and it's king. It's sports has always been king in Texas. College football, college basketball, professional football and basketball, and other major league sports as well, baseball too. So what is the perspective there in Texas, and what kind of reactions have you been getting? Because I know you're on social media a lot, and I've seen some of the reactions. There's been some pushback on some of
Oh yeah.
the activities that are taking place on some of these boycotts by professional players.
Well, you know, when the pandemic kicked in and all the leagues were shut down, it was hard to find a sports story other than we think they'll be back at this time. And now they've come back on a limited basis, you know, in an abbreviated way in terms of baseball with 60 games, the NBA playoffs going on right now, and football training camp, for all intent purposes, their season's underway. People want to talk about what's going on the field. But the problem is the coaches and the players aren't talking about what's going on the field. And I think I applaud the NBA, and I'm glad they're going to resume their season because they have the best platform going. We had real quick, we had an incident, not an incident, we had a scenario here, a high school named Robert E. Lee High School. Across town, the high school, that's the alma mater of Earl Campbell, John Tyler High School. Mr. John Tyler was the 10th president of the U.S., was a slave owner. Robert E. Lee, you know his background. There's a young track athlete. Again, this is athletes. Get this. This young 15-year-old freshman who was an up-and-coming track star, who was from Africa, was adopted by a white family here. Her and her brother, their parents died. The young lady did her homework, first year in high school, Robert E. Lee, on who is Robert E. Lee. And just imagine her amazement when she made the connection of the Civil War, Robert E. Lee, and where she's from, Africa, West Africa. She wrote a letter and was allowed to read it to the school board. She told them, I will not compete with a Robert E. Lee uniform on my body as long as the school is called Robert E. Lee. Now, you got people who were born and bred here, and this was blasphemy. Who is this 15-year-old African adopted girl to come in and tell us what she wants? Well, you know what? They changed the name, changed it to Legacy High School, which, all right. And John Tyler, because Earl Campbell got involved with the mix because he says, well, not only should you change the name of that school, change the name of the school that I went to. They kind of compromised. They just call it Tyler High as opposed to John Tyler High. but I applaud that young lady. And that young lady is the one that got the attention of Earl Campbell. Folks, Earl Campbell, and I know some of you are from a different generation, he is what Patrick Mahomes is to the NFL today. And let me throw this bit in there. Patrick Mahomes and Earl Campbell come from the same town, Tyler, Texas. So football players just fall off of trees here. But for the young athletes to take notice, and for this young lady, nobody knows who she is. She doesn't have a Nike endorsement or anything like that. She was just standing up for what she believed in, and kudos to her and others like her who may hesitate to come out forward and say, listen, I don't like that.
There is in all these people who are stepping up and protesting. And you know, it's not just a protest, they're demanding change, and they're in all kinds of different ways. It's interesting to me. I was looking yesterday at the NBA, the Players Association. I mean, a lot of the Black Lives Matter folks in the NBA are actually saying we're making demand. We want these changes. They're being very specific. They're not just protesting, but they're actually putting together. And a lot of this, in this case, has to do with the officer of law enforcement when they make car stops, for example. how relevant is that when you see that now, that specificity coming from athletes, from professional athletes, not just saying we're protesting, but they're being very specific about the changes that they would like also to see being made to try and stop these kinds of injustices from taking place.
Well, I think too often in the past, when you've had a mini movement, those who were in that movement, it came across, and I put Kaepernick in this category. Okay, what do you want? They didn't have a list, you know, and so therefore they're like, oh, you're just screaming and being mad for the sake of screaming and being mad. And I think there's some lessons learned along the way. So now, with what you just say, they want specifics. They want tangible stuff. They want things to happen. And, you know, it was funny to me because I don't think the movement, anyone asked for the Black National Anthem to be sung at the opening NFL game. I don't think the movement asked for Black Lives Matter to be painted on a basketball court. I mean, okay, that's a nice gesture, but we didn't ask for that. So now be specific. What is it you want? And that's what they're doing. And a big part of that is they want stadiums and arenas to be open for polling, for folks to be able to go to register to vote or go vote. You know, because too often you can't find the place isn't there anymore. I know the Chiefs are talking about doing that in Kansas City. Everybody knows where Arrowhead is. Everybody knows, even those who don't get a chance to get a season ticket, but they'll go and vote at Arrowhead. And I think that's a great, great gesture, a great request. And as long as the owners are open-minded, they don't have to agree, but they have to be open-minded. And they also have to understand, if my player is happy, it's kind of like your wife. If mama's happy, everybody's happy. If the player's happy, everybody's going to be happy. So I think it would behoove the owners of these pro franchises to listen and don't do what they did to Colin Kaepernick 4 years ago and not listen.
All right, Mike, I'm going to ask you an instructive question here in a second, but before we do, for everybody who's on our Zoom get-together today, if you want to make a comment, jump into the chat window there. If you have a question you'd like me to forward to Mike, I will do that as well. But Mike, before I get to one of my students' questions as well, I want to ask you one more question here, and that is, when we're talking about all these things that are happening right now, how important is it for people who are in the world of sports media, sports anchors like yourself, sports reporters, sports columnists and writers, how important is it for them to have a grasp of these social justice issues beyond the sports that they're covering?
Well, I think it's very important. And when I do my sports, I look at myself as a historian. I think sports guys are that if you revel in what used to be. Every chance I get, I talk about the Negro League Baseball Museum, my favorite place in the world. And you see the national commercial that runs. I talk about the National League. Today is Jackie Robinson Day. Although it's Friday Night Football, I'm going to get in a Jackie Robinson something somewhere today. And so I think it's important. So I call myself giving folks a history lesson. Understand why this is happening. Sports is supposed to be fun, and it is fun. But whenever I get an opportunity to educate, to inform, I'm not really heavy-handed with it. So, hey, did you know? Boom, 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 boom. And some folks will respond, say, I never knew that. And it wants them to, I'm going to read up further on this. You know, I'm pretty sure your class, they know who Jackie Robinson is, but do they know who Mac Robinson is? Mac Robinson took second to Jesse Owens in the Olympics in the 200 meters. He was just as good as his brother Jackie, but yet, and he went to Oregon, integrated school. His brother went to UCLA, played integrated sports. However, when Mac Robinson got back home to LA, the only job he could get was a street sweeper. And he would wear his Olympic jacket in the cool nights and sweep the streets. And the mayor and other officials used to ask him, please don't wear that because that's an embarrassment that an Olympian is doing this. He's like, well, you give me a better job and I don't have to wear this jacket. And so there are contexts out there that and nuance out there. And we also have to say, if it weren't for the white athletes, this movement would not be half as successful as it is, because there are people who look like people this is aimed at, and they're going, wait a minute, let me look into this. Peter Norman, who took third to Tommy Lee and John Carlos in the '68 Olympics, and they threw with the Black Power fist. during the ceremony, they got shipped home fast. Well, we never hear the story about Mr. Norman, the white guy who also supported those two guys, and he was treated very badly in Australia. But we don't hear his story. He's a white man who stood up with those athletes who were sent home. And now there's a, not now, but there's a statue of those two gentlemen, Tommy Smith and Carlos, and Mr. Norman in the replica of that day of that ceremony. So there are untold stories that need to be balanced in to what's going on as well.
Connecting the dots, and it's important.
Yeah.
Mike, Austin Kingsley, one of our students, he had a question to you. He wants to know to what extent are these protests from the athletes and sports figures, do you think it's going to be enough to actually bring about change in our country this time?
Great question. Let me harken back to Jackie Robinson, who probably to date had the toughest job of anybody, breaking in baseball, a white man's game. That's why the Negro Leagues were around, because they weren't allowed to play baseball at that level in the major leaguers. And so, let me get this out. Jackie was not the best player, but he had the best temperament. He had the best temperament. He could withstand somebody spitting in his face, slapping him, and restrain. If that experiment had failed, just think about what it would be like today. Now, fast forward to the 21st century. Look at what's going on today. You know, so just imagine if he hadn't done that. So I think with these athletes, they understand. Think about athletes. They know to be good at anything, it's a work in progress. That's why you train. That's why you have training camps. That's why you work out. So when it's time to show your stuff and the lights come on, I'm prepared. And I think these athletes across the board, they know it's not going to happen by next Tuesday. But what they want is continuing dialogue. They want to see process. You know, the thing about slavery, for so long, the slaves were told, wait, wait, wait. Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, Dr. King was throwing out there, like, well, you need to wait. Wait for what? What are we waiting on? And I think that's the case with these athletes. They're being told, you told us to wait way too long. So now we want action. And I think the mere fact that they know how to work as a team among each other, even if you have to compromise, that's fine.
Caroline Frank wants to know about the athletes on these major league teams who are not participating in the protests. What do you think about those athletes that, at least at this point, have not taken a stance?
And that's okay. You don't need everybody, just need a lot of bodies. And everything else will happen in time. I mean, things evolve. And it's like, again, it represents us as a country, as a democracy. I don't agree with you. I'm not going to try to change your mind, but I'll defend your right to disagree with me. And as long as nobody's putting their hands on one another, it's okay to disagree. That's the beauty of everything. Because maybe that person who disagrees with that movement or that attempt to make things right, maybe they're not there yet. You know, President Obama, I mean, you know, he legalized gay marriage. That was not something on his list when he came in, but he evolved. And I think that's the problem we have today as people. We don't think a person could ever change their mind on anything. George Wallace, one of the biggest racist presidential candidates ever in the history of mankind, who was a Southern Democrat. I mean, he hated black people. He kept black people from going to school and integrating it. But you know what? It took a bullet wound, but eventually he came around and said, wow, I wish I had knew now, I wish I knew then what I know now. So people evolve, and it's okay to disagree. It's okay, as long as that person is not being personal about it.
You know, we were talking about professional sports, but let's go to college sports. And a student from Nebraska here has this question for you here. They wanted to know, for somebody who's an athlete here in Nebraska, how can they get their coaches to listen to their own demands and actually get them to show they care about the Black Lives Matter movement? How would you, and you've participated in college sports. You were running a football running back at SIU. So if you were going to take up this issue with a coach, a college coach? How would you go about doing that?
Well, one thing, when you're being recruited, being wined and dined, the coaches love you. And they talk about how, they don't just talk about you as a player, they talk about you as a person. And for my case, that was one of the reasons why I wound up at SIU, because I thought, wow, not only do they care about me as a person, I mean, as a player, but also a person. Well, I would have to think, if you thought about this young man as a person also, then what he is saying is, I'm that person that you thought I was. I'm just living up to being who I am. And I have a problem with some things, and I want to speak out on it. I love being here, but things can be done better. And that's all, just one dialogue. And I think if I was a young athlete who had to convince his coach of that, you remind that coach, yeah, you didn't recruit me just because I'm a good ball player. You've even said on tape, I'm a good person. I'm just living up to what you saw in me. And how can a coach deny somebody that? You got somebody that's willing to be open. And again, that's a show of leadership too.
Yeah.
You got somebody coming into your office wanting to be a part of the movement, and he's not a person that jumps to the gun about anything. You've seen him be fair with others. Who better to have as a team leader to squash whatever potential negativity or blowback happens?
I have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
What if you did try those things, or a group of your teammates or like people from other sports have tried that, but from the athletic staff and department, we haven't really gotten any answers back, and it's kind of like we're just waiting for them to respond?
First of all, are you one of those athletes?
Yes, I'm on the track and field team.
Okay. What do you run? You're a sprinter, jumper?
I run the 400 and the 800.
I ran the 400. That's a heck of a race. Heck of a race. Good for you. Well, don't do anything to derail the track you're on. I mean, I know you want response. I know you want reciprocation. I want y'all to listen to us. Don't do anything to deviate from the plan, because that will become the subject matter and not what you really want. And just keep letting them know, I'm still waiting. And that's going to be, and if they're going to be hard, fast about not wanting to do anything, they should just come out and tell you, we don't want to do anything. That way, okay, I need to have a different plan then. So have you a plan B? I mean, you've done all you can. You've exhausted everything on the table, and you got the response that we're not going to be open-minded. Doesn't mean that the journey's over. You are still who you are, despite what I'm telling you. So the way you are now in terms of wanting to hear back from them, even though you may not hear what you want from them, you're still that person who's trying to do good and be in good faith with it. Have you a plan B? Have you a backup?
Chelsea, Chelsea, just a quick one for you here too. There is some precedent here on this campus in the athletic department. I don't know if you knew this, but when the whole Kaepernick thing broke loose, what was that, 4 years ago now, Mike?
Yeah.
Today, right? You said today.
Yeah, pretty much.
So when that happened, the University of Nebraska football team, players on that team were the first Division I program to kneel during the playing of the national anthem at the Northwestern football game. And they were then given a platform a few days later by the athletic department to explain their rationale and why they felt so strongly about joining that protest. And they were given that public forum by the university. So yes, there is a precedent here involving people in the athletic department, and more importantly, the athletes themselves who went to their coaches and said, Coach, we got to talk about this. And this is what we're planning to do. So you might even be able to bring that to the attention of your own coaches as you express your own concerns and the concerns of other athletes that you compete with and train with as well.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank
Mike,
thank you. Good luck.
Yeah. Alex Kopp had the most efficient way, in your opinion, for pro athletes to make a difference in this movement now, and that is it's hierarchical, because we've seen now this broad group of professional athletes in multiple sports standing together in protest against the police brutality that they witnessed this week, that we all witnessed as a nation this week in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So what then would have to take it to the next level, and then what might pro athletes do?
I think the next level means for those who are in charge, because the athletes are willing to talk. The athletes are willing to Zoom, or more importantly, engage. You got to change the minds of those who are trying not to. And, and you just have to hope that there's somebody that's smarter than the rest of the naysayers. Like, listen, we need to deal with this. And see, I think that's why we're in the boat we're in today. Is too many. We'll look at it later. We'll tend to it later. And when later comes, it's like, but I thought, well, we're going. There's always a distraction or something that's come up. And because let's face it, if players told the coach, I don't feel like going to practice today, I'm going to go to the movies and hang out. You're not. Coach is not going to let you do that, because you have a responsibility. And so for young people especially, there are people you go to, people who are in authority, that they have to have responsibility. You're not just a piece of meat out here, drawing up fans to come to a game or to an event or a meet. You're also a person, because you live here too. And I just think if you want a team that's whole, if they're satisfied off the court, then there's less distractions on the court. They don't have to worry about that stuff. And I think that's what the NBA players found themselves doing. And they're living the life of Riley, the great food, the accommodations, but in their heart, that's not what they were feeling, because, pro athlete has to have passion to play his sport. And that same passion came from somewhere, because you were a human being long before you were a basketball player. So you have to always resort to who you are inside.
One of our students wanted to know yourself personally. You talked about a lot of the professional athletes have had their own personal experiences when they weren't wearing a team uniform. We know of at least one of those players who was pulled over by law enforcement and did not have a very good outcome with that situation. How about yourself? Have you ever had something like that happen to you?
Not as an athlete, but just as a common Joe. And it's funny, because about 2 months ago, when all this was really coming out, longer than that actually, I did an editorial. I shared a life experience that I had in Sugar Land, Texas, and someone told me here recently, well, that's during the Civil War. They had a plantation and they had a sugar plant there. I said, well, it was the perfect city then, because I kind of felt they had that kind of vibe there. But I had a situation where I was pulled over in the rain. I worked for, the Nielsen ratings. I used to work for Nielsen ratings. And my job was to go around the country, specifically in the southwest part of the country, and find out what people's viewing habits were. Like I've always joked, during that era in the 80s, the Dukes of Hazzard was the #1 watch TV show. I said, we are in trouble, okay? But I got pulled over by a police officer, and he noticed that my driver's license was Kansas and my company car was Florida, so something must be up. He had me get out of the car, had me spread eagle with my arms on top of the hood. It's pouring down rain. I'm wearing this nice suit, and I'm mouthing off. I'm being flipped because I didn't do anything. Well, sometimes that doesn't mean anything. In the meantime, my buddy who I went to college with, we had connected for dinner. He was crying. He was telling me, man, don't say nothing. Don't say anything. When I saw how serious he was and seeing those tears come down, I backed off. But only after I also got hit in the back, the left side of my thigh with a baton. So I was kind of like slouched, like, this is ridiculous. That's my body language. And the cop says, I thought I told you to stand at attention with your arms spread, and he hit me in the back of my leg. Another cop car comes up. He gets out of the car, and he said, what do we have here? So, well, we have a Kansas driver's license, and we have a guy with that license who has a Florida license plate, which I just come from Florida. And he doesn't know how to take direction from anybody, And when I heard that, I thought, wow, this is how it's going to be in this rainy parking lot in Houston, Texas. Eventually, I got a chance to brake, and when I got in the car, my hands was trembling, and I've never trembled that way before, or any other way. It was shaking. It was shaking. So it gave me a lot of soul searching that I had to do. I had to learn not to be so quick, because I understand police have a tough job. I used to be a corrections officer. I used to work for Douglas County Jail in Lawrence, in between colleges. So, with Alan Johnson's dad, a guy that we grew up with. And I know how police can be when I would see them in action just doing my shift. But I was just I'm just an employee. Sometimes I would try to intervene. I would tell the prisoner, listen, you have no allies here. I'm your best shot. All I want to do is type up who you are, get you out of here. If there's nothing on you that makes you stay here, but you're not going to win with these cops because they tussle, they had an altercation. And I said, you're losing. You're losing because I'm the best way for you to get out of here. And I was able to calm him down. And see, that's one thing I learned to do if I'd gone into law enforcement as a jailer, corrections officer, is temper the flames. I've been able to do that when we had some things go on, and I'm able to go in there and say, hey, listen, you know, and I think part of that was because I showed respect to those guys. So when I hear these stories, I visualize myself from years ago, and I got a lot of good positive feedback on that editorial that I had done, you know. And the only reason why I did it, Barney, was because people began to ask me about the movement and the athletes. And I thought, you know, I've been asked that so much, maybe I should go ahead and just address it as a whole. So that's just it. So I have, and my whole point was to let people know I'm a friendly guy, I'm a fun guy, but I'm not immune to being bullied by police officers.
Jake Bartecki wants to take us on to the racetrack here and ask you about Bubba Wallace and how NASCAR is handling racial injustice issues. Do you think NASCAR has been stepping up? They certainly had a long way to move, didn't they?
Yeah, they're right. They had nowhere to go but up. But kudos to them. Again, that was another opportunity for me to share a slice of history. Back in 1963, I can't think of his name right now, but it was played in the movie by Richard Pryor, the NASCAR driver, the first black NASCAR driver, recognized black NASCAR driver. And he won his race. He won his race, but he didn't get the trophy. And here's what was behind that. The winner of the race was going to get a kiss from Miss Track and Field, a white lady. And so this gentleman, Oliver is going to come to me. Wendell Scott maintains, I didn't win, although I won, but didn't get the trophy because that meant the white girl would have to kiss me. And they didn't want her doing that. That's why I did not win the race officially to them. They eventually gave him the trophy. But see what kind of situation you put yourself in when you do those kind of things? Are we going to put this pretty white lady up here? You're going to kiss the winner. What if the guy's black? I ain't no black guy going to win this race. It's 1963. Oliver Wendell wins it. But things like that, just stupid stuff like that. Like when I look back on I love my mother. My mother's 80 years old. She's still rocking and rolling. And she's the nicest lady in the world. Why would my mother have to drink out of a fountain that says colored only? Why would my mother not be allowed to use somebody's bathroom at the gas station? She's a nice lady. She's my mom, you know? And so when you think about those things that your parents and grandparents went through and not so far along or not so far ago, you go, wow,
Hey,
we
Mike,
still got some work to do.
when you and I were growing up in Lawrence, Kansas, when we were little kids, your parents couldn't go to the swimming pool over by the
Nope.
because
You know.
I do.
You know.
And
Let me tell you something real quick on that. Our good friend Kim Murphy, the great singer that she is, I went and watched her play somewhere on KU, and the gentleman at the same table, I didn't know, and she introduced us. Oh, how you doing? So later on, she says, don't you know him? I said, no. She said, well, he was the manager of the Lawrence swimming pool. I said, well, you know, when I was growing up, blacks were not allowed to go to the Lawrence swimming pool. It was such an awkward moment, and she felt bad. I said, I don't feel bad. It's just that sometimes now that we're of age, there are things that were going on. It's so embarrassing 50 years later. That's why I didn't know that guy. I'm pretty sure he's a nice guy, but I never had an encounter with him. So things like that.
Yeah. And by the way, if you guys love sports, Kevin Wilmot, a great friend of ours, and down in Lawrence, Kansas, produced a movie about Will Chamberlain's experiences in Lawrence, Kansas, and kind of helping to break a little bit of the color barrier in Lawrence, Kansas in the 1950s when he first played basketball in college. Okay, we got a question. Will has a question he wants to ask you. Will, the forum is yours.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for
How you doing,
talking
Will?
to
How you
us
doing,
today.
buddy? All right.
Good. How are you? So I think, well, I'm involved with the Unlimited Sports, which is our College of Journalism's like student media publication for sports. And I think I'm wondering like what role you think all of us student journalists can play with social justice issues like these that we're talking about right now?
That's a great, great question. And I think where you all are going to have a leg up on us previous generation of journalists is that you have a whole lot of life to live, and you're going to be a father. You're going to have kids, and you want to think about that family as well. You want to think about, how can I, with my job as a person who has a platform to talk to athletes, to talk to athletic officials about hot topics, how can I make a change where it might be a subtle change, but in the big picture, it's going to benefit my kids. And so this is not an easy topic to talk about when it comes to the movement and all of that, but it was supposed to be easy. If it was easy, this had been resolved years ago. What we as a country and we as people have done is put that conversation off. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Sometimes it gets too late to get to it. Colin Kaepernick is a perfect example. I mean, the commissioner, Roger Goodell, just recently said, we didn't listen. We should have listened. I'm not going to completely absolve Kaepernick. There are some things he could have done better to help those who doubted him, owners, understand more where he's coming from. Doesn't mean they would all of a sudden jump on board with him, but at least now they know. And it made it easier for some haters to attack Colin Kaepernick's movement, And so I think he could have handled it differently, but I praise him for having the guts to do it, because you make the difference not when everybody else is doing it, but when it's the first guy that does it. He was on an island all by himself. And I think that does not question his ethics and what he truly believed in. It never was about the flag at all. And there's reminiscence of Muhammad Ali. I mean, what attracted me to Muhammad Ali was his being quip, his quick quip, his rhymes, his having fun, and his predictions. I'm gonna knock you out in round 4. If you're not really good, you get knocked out in round 2. I mean, Barney would tell you, Muhammad Ali called the round. He's gonna knock his guy out. He was a breath of fresh air. But then he wanted to become a Muslim. Malcolm X. Malcolm X was like the 4-letter word back in the day. Oh my God, it's Malcolm X. Everybody's tripping and everything.
Oh, by the way, I got to jump in here. Malcolm X from Omaha, Nebraska. Go ahead.
That's right. And used to be a comedic partner with Red Fox, by the way. But for Ali to do that at that time, and when people say Ali dodged a draft, he didn't dodge a draft. He just said, I'm not going. He went to the office and said, I am not going. Put me in jail. And so for me as a young black kid, and Barney, we had our problems in early 1970 with Tiger Didal getting shot and killed. That was an eye opener for me. I thought, wow, here's a black man talking to a bunch of white guys like he don't care. And I wasn't scared for him. I was like, whoa. And that's what turned me on to Ali more. What he did outside the ring than what he did inside the ring. He was beautiful. And it was easy to see how they tried to find a great white hope, because boxing then is what the NFL is today. To your class case, they don't know it, And so I think when you have a person that does it first, Jackie did it first, the second guy to do it, I feel bad, I can't think of his name, but he did it with the Cleveland Indians, like 2 months later. So when you're the first, you set the tone. So I think with these athletes, they have nothing to lose. They're rich, but that's all secondary. And I think more and more of the white athletes, Tom Brady just commented, Tom Brady is not a political guy whatsoever. But Tom Brady, the old man that he is, he has spoken out now against the brutality of police. And no one's questioning someone's character when they get shot. I don't know if this guy's supposed to have a criminal record. He wasn't being arrested for having a criminal record, or he wasn't being sought after for a criminal record. One bullet was one too many, And so I think what people need to realize is just because a person has had a stretch of bad luck doesn't mean he deserves to be shot in the back 7 times. And what's really crazy is his leg is handcuffed to the bedpost in the hospital. The guy's paralyzed. Where's he going to go? See stuff like that. That fuels the fire. That fuels the hate, or something like that.
Mike, Kylie Sadamka wanted to know, we've seen all these professional sports teams and enterprises, NBA, WNBA, Major League Baseball. Are there some professional sports that haven't been part of this boycott that you think should also be stepping up?
Well, yeah, and they fixed it right away. I know there was a black player in the NHL a couple of days ago, maybe even as late as yesterday. He said, I'm ashamed because we're not standing up, we're not doing what the other leagues are doing. Now, the NHL is probably 0.2% black. But again, like I said, if you get people who don't look like those who are in the movement to stand up and say time out, that goes a long way too. And so the NHL, they're now involved as well. So they're about the only ones that did not partake. And they're not an American sport. We understand that. But, you know, it's Canada. We're brothers and sisters, stand up for one another. So I tip my hat to the NHL for coming to the game late, but they did it.
Evander Kane was that player in the NHL.
Okay.
Who
Yeah.
stepped up. Yeah, Alex Corp he loves hockey, so he's our expert on that. Katie Pryor
Great
wants
question.
to know this from the perspective of someone like yourself who works in the media. How do you handle backlash when you get it? And you get it because I watch it happen to you, and I respect you for that. But how do you handle that? What advice do you have?
Well, and sometimes I don't like how I handle it because I think I shouldn't have said it. Because, you know, man, you do this for a living. You're a public figure, no matter where you are. You're a public figure. And there are some things a public figure. I mean, athletes are public figures too, but they're a different kind of public figure. I'm a person that's part of the media. I haven't heard anybody say yet fake sports media. So far, so good. So I have to sometimes temper what I say. But when it comes to racism and when it comes to athletes, those are two things I know quite a bit about. You know, I mean, I mean, growing up at home in Lawrence, for the most part, was a pretty cool thing. You know, you and I grew up around mixed people. And I always say your life experiences help determine the kind of person you're going to be. And the tough part might be for some is whatever values that you have within you, when you leave home, can you maintain those values? I was called the N-word one time. Well, not one time, but on this particular time. I went in to get some gas, and two gentlemen were coming out the store. And I just say, hey, I speak to everybody. Hey, guys, how you doing? As I walked past them, someone said, how you doing, N-word. So I go inside, I'm paying my gas. Well, and those two guys got into this truck. Well, it's not like I was going to do anything anyway, let alone with three guys. And well, it is what it is. I'm in Florida. So as I paid my tab, I was going back to my car. I had a date. When I got past the truck, somebody apologized to me. Well, it wound up being the driver of that truck who was sitting in the truck at the time who said that to me. He said, hey, man, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you that. And I went back to him. I said, no, yes, you did. You meant to call me that, and you thought you were going to elicit a reaction from me, but you didn't, and you look bad in front of your guys here. I said, let me tell you something. I'm not from here. I'm from Middle America, where with the people I grew up with, black and white and Native Americans, you know, I get along with everybody because I was learned how to do that. And for those who want to start something, I have no reason to be around you. And he really got mad, Barney, that I would not take his apology. And that was so refreshing because I ain't gonna lie, my knees were shaking when I walked back to the truck. I don't know what these guys had packing, but I was able to. That's what education does for you. That's what education does for you. That's what being or trying to be a well-rounded person can do for you. It can allow you to stand up for who you are and what you believe in. You don't have to use a cuss word. You don't have to go to that level. But when you talk to people with an intellect, they are intimidated. I get phone calls from people who get upset about something I said or did, or they thought I said or did, and they'll leave me a phone number. I said, well, I guess they want me to call them back. I call them back. Hey, yo, this is Michael Coleman, KLTV. You left a voicemail. Oh, you called. I said, well, you left the phone number. I figured you wanted to talk about something. Well, no, it was nothing. It was nothing. But I forged a friendly viewer 25 seconds later. And I said, well, what do you think the Cowboys are going to do? Well, I think this and that. So listen, man, you got any problem with me? This is a number you can call me at. So I give a person the forum to come jump on me if they want. But I try to temper it. And so I appreciate what you're saying with that. But it's all about how you were treated and when you were raised and what difficult times. Because there's no phone call in this world regarding sports is going to rock or save my day.
We have about 3 minutes left, and I have a couple more questions. Zachary Efforts wanted to know, do you think that when these kinds of stories like Kenosha, Wisconsin explodes, that we as a society sometimes jump too quickly to our conclusions before we actually know the facts of the case?
We do. And you know what's, and you know, there are justifiable killings, but the race factor becomes so immediate. Nobody wears that hat. Nobody wears the non-race factor. Nobody wears that hat does not get worn. And I think, you know, it's like, I'm a big Richard Pryor fan, as most of us from that era were. And he talks about having an argument with a white gentleman in his office. You know, he's playing the role as Rich does. And they're getting after one another. They disagree, but everything's cool. Nobody's swearing. Well, then the guy calls him the N-word. It's like, oh man, he done took this to a whole different level. If he's just a jerk, I'm cool with that. But now he's got to be he's got to be a racist jerk. That's what the problem is. So what happens is when we react quickly and immediately, just for what we see, and it's a black and white, the race jumps up front spot 0 to 60 quickly. And that's unfortunate because that becomes a part of the conversation. And, you know, all folks get treated badly with brutality. I think the question mark here is the proportionate numbers that it's occurring at. I've seen videos of white suspects spit on cops, grab a cop from behind and choke him, but he goes to the prison standing on his 2 feet. And that's what the answer is being sought after. Why is it being done this way?
One more question, and I'm just going to put it out to the students who are joining us today. And thank you all for tuning in. For Mike, great to see you again, my friend.
Likewise, B-Mac.
But yeah, throw one out there. Is there some student out there that would like to go ahead and voice a question that you'd like Mike to give an answer to?
Yeah, I'll ask him one. You mentioned about Bubba Wallace, and NASCAR has done a pretty good job coming back from where they were. There's 2 athletes that I think are more prominent and probably the most prominent in their sports and prominent of all time that have been really quiet, and that's Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods. How would that help the movement if they chimed in, and what do you think of them not chiming in?
Timely question, a great question. You know, Michael Jordan in the last couple of days has become the interloper between the players and the owners. He's the only majority or only black owner in the NBA. And so now he is involved. He's reached out to Chris Paul and say, let me go ahead and help you guys get what you're looking for. As an owner, I have roads in. That is tremendous. That is tremendous. Now, Mike's not known for getting involved with stuff like that. I mean, you probably saw The Last Dance. He got criticized for saying Jesse Helms, when he was running for office in North Carolina against Mr. Gatt, I can't think of his first name. Last name might be incorrect, but it was a black guy. And people and he's from North Carolina, and people just assumed because Michael was black, he was going to endorse the black guy. Even his mother wanted him to endorse the black guy. He said, well, Mom, I don't know this guy. And we didn't get him in trouble, but what raised eyebrows is when he made the comment off the cuff. It wasn't intended for media, but media was on the buses when he said, when he wouldn't come out for something or against something. He's like, well, Republicans buy shoes too. Well, folks took that as being very insensitive to the nature of where he's from. I admired his honesty when he tells his mother, or as he tells the story, I didn't know a thing about the guy she wanted me to endorse. I mean, I can't go endorse somebody I don't know anything about. But now, fast forward to now, he is very much involved in what's going on. He has the respect of all the younger generation guys. And for him, he made the move. When Chris Paul didn't go to Mike, Mike went to Chris Paul. And I think that speaks volumes. I think that's tremendous. As for Tiger, no, you know, Tiger's a different kind of guy. Because Tiger's father, from what I can remember about him, you know, he's buried in Manhattan. He's from Manhattan, played baseball at Kansas State, was the first black Big 8 baseball player at K-State. His father wasn't militant, he was very, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. Sort of like the Serena and Venus twins' father, Mr. Williams. You know, he was that way. I thought that the 3 fathers that I really admire is Tiger Woods' father, Michael Jackson's father, Joe Jackson, that's the entertainer, and Tiger's father, because they knew what they were up against in that era, in that time, and they refused to settle. So with Tiger, the black community, they are disappointed with Tiger because he does not accept his blackness, quite honestly. He called himself Calabasian. But, you know, I know his mother's Asian. That word, I don't know if he made it up or whatever it is, but we are so, blacks and whites, consumed with race, so consumed with race. You know, I can remember as a kid when one of the politicians would get shot, my grandmother's like, well, who wasn't a black guy? You know, and it wasn't. So that's where they came from. So now you fast forward to today, and our athletes, Russell Wilson was questioned about his blackness 2 years ago. Patrick Mahomes was questioned about which side would he be on. Then when he did the Black Lives Matter video, that kind of like, whew, see, that's where we are in all aspects of the world. So I just think there's room. There are more people who think the right way than the wrong way. And those are the ones we need to hear more from. And I think with this movement, it's off to a good start.